This is Amy, and you're listening to the Talkin Appalachian podcast.
Snakes on the porch and the devil's on the creek in a mason jar. And the old man tends a fire, poking them coals and the cussing the dark with his eyes aglow. He's watching the flames go higher on Diamond Creek.
I'm so excited about today's podcast because I am at the John Fox Jr. house in Big Stone Gap, Virginia, with author Jeannette Walls, who wrote The Glass Castle. Now, she was here for Mountain Empire Community College's John Fox Jr. Literary Festival, and she gave this amazing talk this morning, just mesmerizing talk. So I want to thank them for giving me the opportunity to sit down with her after this. And also I want to thank Amy Greer for connecting me with Miss Walls for this interview. And I want to thank her for giving me the time after such a long day of talking with people to sit down for the Talkin Appalachian podcast. Now, Jeannette Walls is originally from Phoenix, and she grew up moving around the country with her family, but they did spend a great deal of her childhood in Welch, West Virginia, before she ended up in New York at the age of 19. She is the best-selling author of The Glass Castle, a memoir that recounts her dysfunctional and nomadic upbringing. Glass Castle was a New York Times bestseller for over 8 years, and it was named one of the top 10 books of the decade by Amazon. In 2017, Glass Castle was made into a movie starring Brie Larson, Woody Harrelson, and Naomi Watts, and the movie is really, really good, but read the book first. Walls is also the author of 2 other New York Times bestsellers, The Silver Star and Half Broke Horses, which was named one of the best books of 2009 by the New York Times Book Review. She's won so many awards, but her newest book, Hang the Moon, was published in March 2023, and it was named a Library Reads pick for March 2023, and the most anticipated book of 2023 by Oprah Daily, Elle, and LitHub. She's a gifted storyteller, and she's been sharing this story since the memoir was published in 2005. It's hard to think of original questions to ask her after she's probably talked about this so much. But the memoir is about her and her siblings' unconventional upbringing, and it covers a childhood spent in extreme poverty and chaos with parents who, despite their flaws, taught them to embrace life fearlessly. And she continues to captivate audiences. I saw her do it this morning with her incredible story. And she really offers a unique perspective on overcoming obstacles and confronting those challenges and being authentic and being truthful. She's written for New York Magazine, Esquire, and MSNBC, and she's appeared on The Today Show, Primetime, and The Colbert Report. And after many years in New York, Walls currently lives with her husband in rural Virginia, and we're just so happy to have her here in Virginia. One of the compelling scenes in this book is probably the opening scene, and she opened her talk with that this morning, where she recounts being in a taxi in New York City, and I think she said she was on her way to an interview, and she looks over and she sees a homeless woman rooting through a dumpster. She said ordinarily, that would be an everyday occurrence to see that. But she said she looked closer and she recognized that it was her mother. This story is so complex. It's about shame. It's about truth. It's about seeing the gifts in something that other people might see as abuse or neglect. She sees the gifts, and she's going to talk about. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jeannette Walls.
Just might come out fine. Best not to wonder on that old man still. Might get out, but some never will.
This interview took place in the office of John Fox Jr. at the John Fox Jr. house, and she had just finished having lunch. It was a ticketed luncheon, and so you're going to hear some background noise. You're going to hear people laughing, people talking, people coming and going. So do you consider yourself Appalachian to some degree, or do you identify a little bit with being Appalachian?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And, it's funny because I know that some people wince a little at that label. Well, first of all, labels can be ridiculous to begin with, but to me what that just means is tough, just very independent, that you can take care of yourself. I love the fact that I'm from West Virginia. It gives you an identity without defining you.
On the topic of your dad, would you retell the story about Woody Harrelson?
Oh,
that absolutely moved me. I mean, that was such a moving story.
Oh, Amy, the reason that I tell that story is because I was thinking a whole lot about fiction and how do you create characters? How do you know what these characters would say? How do you make them come alive? So Woody Harrelson was cast as my father, and when I first heard about the casting, I thought, well, that's a little odd. You know, he's blonde and blue-eyed. When he had hair, it was blonde. But the fact that he didn't look that much like my dad doesn't matter that much, because most people don't know what my dad looked like. And he called me even before we met, and he was asking these really interesting, very direct questions. Like, when he talked to you, did he look you on the eyes? When he talked to you, did he look you in the eyes? And when he talked to you, what did he do with his hands? Mm-hmm. These really basic physical questions. And so I said, he crushed beer cans with his hands, like not wimpy beer cans like they have now, but back when a beer can was a beer can. And he loved that. He loved, because that was Cool Hand Luke, Paul Newman and Cool Hand Luke, and he wanted to base it on somebody. The more I talked to him, the more it became clear he didn't want to make it up. He wanted to base it on something. He was fixated on the walk. And we kept on talking about the walk. But so eventually I told him that I thought that Dad kind of copied Chuck Yeager a little bit, and that Sam Shepard nailed it in The Right Stuff. So he really liked that. Then the first time I saw Woody Harrelson in character, I burst into tears. I could not believe my eyes. He had the physicality of my father down to a T. And it was so interesting for me, the degree to which, like, the physicality and the emotion, they're really linked. It's the same thing. The personality manifests itself in the gestures, and he had the gestures. He had the posture, the cigarette behind his ear, and he had the walk. But here was the thing that really blew me. So they're going back and forth. They're shooting this scene in which the Brie Larson character, that would be me, wanted to leave home, and the father was trying to convince her to stay. Then they went off script, and Woody started saying things that my father had said that I had not told him. And I was a basket case. I was a mess. And afterwards, he saw me crying in a corner. He came over and hugged me. And I knew I'm not so stupid, or I wasn't as thrown to think that he was actually my father. But I started apologizing. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry. I should have done. And he said this in my father's voice. He said, you had to do it, honey. You had to leave, or we wouldn't be here. And it was one of those magical moments that life gives you. He understood Dad that well. That's what Dad would have said. I was able to be absolved by my father in proxy. And it was very powerful for my writing, for my fiction writing, to understand that is what fiction writing is about. It's giving voice to people who do not have a voice. It is creating characters, but not making them up, because that feels made up. Yeah. But understanding people so well, you know what they would say in any given situation.
Mm-hmm. That gives me chills. That's such a powerful story. I'm sure people, if anybody observed that there, they were equally moved.
Everybody came up afterwards and was trying to hug me.
I was curious about whether you're a spiritual person, because listening to you talk about not needing to forgive anyone, because what you see is not where other people might see abuse and neglect. You see gifts. And that takes a lot of work to be able to transcend the physical and to see that.
I do think of myself as a spiritual person. I keep on going to churches, and none of them quite resonated with me. But I absolutely, yes. And I think it's not that I'm a good person with the whole forgiveness and acceptance issue. It is just coming to understand. It's the gifts from my parents, as wacky as they were, to understand that people are who they are. And often they try their best, but both of my parents were badly damaged. Mm-hmm. And once I found out what was wrong, what had happened to my father, the shock to me is not that he was as damaged as he was, but that there was as much good as there was. And he did his level best to pass that on. The time he tried to detox himself and literally had me tie him to a bed, what more could you ask?
Wow.
You know, if somebody is willing to do that, you know, and my mom, crazy as a bed bug. What can I say? It's just like she didn't give me what I wanted at the time. But having observed so many other parents, you know, I was sitting in on a book club meeting one time, and everybody was going after my mom, how horrible she was. And there was a therapist who was there who said, Jeanette's mother and father, for all the bad things they did, they never once humiliated Jeanette. They never once told her that she wasn't good enough, that she couldn't do things. They said, do you know how extraordinary that is? Mm-hmm. That's very unusual. And they've had, therapists have told me that they've given them copies of The Glass Castle because they have these 60-year-old patients who are spitting on their parents' grave. And it's, you know, there's no amount of money you could pay me to relive my childhood. I'm not going to whitewash it. But I cannot remember not knowing how to read. I cannot remember ever being put down by either of my parents. Every single question I ever asked them, not only did they answer it intelligently and thoughtfully, they would help me research. Let's go look that up. That's an excellent question. Let's go out and look at the mountains and see how they were formed. Let's find the dictionary and look up the meaning of that word and discuss it together. And what a gift. Oh my gosh. And I've still got that gift. Mm-hmm. And I still love looking up stuff and thinking about things. So why would I sit around being angry or pissed off about what I didn't get, or that, you know, I never once told me that I couldn't be what I wanted to be. To the contrary, one time I was really fast as a little kid. I could run, and I won all the blue ribbons when I was in 3rd and 4th grade. I don't know. And then I got beat one time, and my dad's, you know, well, what happened? We talked about it, you know, and he said, well, let's see you run. He said, well, yeah. You're Olympic quality. We could make you there, but you have to want it more than anything in the world. Now let's look at the Olympic careers of various athletes, and let's look at writers' careers. And which one do you want to do? You know, so we sat there and we researched all of these, and I was like, you know, Dad, I think between the two, I'll do the writing. He said, I think that plays into your talents better. I mean, how great is that? So, you know, so I didn't have running water and electricity, and I smelled pretty funky in school, and there were a lot of difficulties. Yeah, I would have given just about anything back then to have been popular. I got to tell you something. I was at an event, and somebody came up to me, not in my class, I don't want to out anybody, but somebody in another class, the most popular girl in school, and she asked me to sign her copy of The Glass Castle, and then she told me her story, and I couldn't believe it. My jaw dropped. And it has just been such a valuable lesson. Don't ever assume that don't assume that you know, but mostly don't be envious. Don't be bitter. You don't know the whole story. People carry burdens, they carry sorrows, they carry fears. A couple of people said, Jeanette, you know what I envy the most about you? You're not afraid of anything. And that's one of the blessings of having been through what I'm not. You know, I know that I can survive. And that's an astonishing blessing. So it's not even forgiveness. It's just sort of you know, you're dealt a hand. Play the bejesus out of it.
Mm-hmm. Someone in the audience today, in your audience, stood up and said that you gave her permission to love.
Was that gorgeous?
Was so powerful.
Amy, people ask me sometimes, don't you get tired of giving these talks? Are you kidding? It's not about me. It wasn't just the audience. The people who have the most powerful things, they wait until the signing because they don't want other people to hear it. Mm. And I hear these gorgeous stories. And there was a young woman today, and she was just talking about how much the book helped her. So it's not about me. Mm-hmm. It's about the degree to which these stories help other people. And storytelling is so powerful. You know, we do shape our stories. We shape our stories, and that is our identity. So we have that power. But at a certain point, our stories start to shape us. And it's very important that we re-examine our story from time to time. You know, I'm not just a girl from Appalachia. I'm a lot more than that. You're not just somebody from the ghetto or from the suburbs or whatever. Don't play the role in your own story. You shape your story. Don't let it shape you too much.
Mm-hmm. So, since the book and the movie, you've done countless interviews, countless talks. You've written novels. Mm-hmm. Are there any new or meaningful revelations that have come to you?
Oh, Amy, every day.
Every day?
every day I hear something that just blows me away. Every day is just filled with, whether I'm working on a new book or giving a talk or at the grocery store and somebody says something beautiful to me. Life is just filled with astonishing gifts if you are willing to receive receive them. But if you are like I was, just protecting yourself and not wanting anybody to see who you really are, you're too clamped up. You've got your armor on. You can't receive those gifts. Yeah. You have to be able to make yourself vulnerable, to take off your armor and receive the love and the kindness. And yeah, you'll get a little dinged up too, because there are some jerks out there, but there's such a small minority. And what I've also come to understand is they've got an agenda. People who, somebody told me that she didn't want to read The Glass Castle because she didn't want to read about somebody who wouldn't take care of her mother. She just read the first couple of paragraphs about me seeing my mom homeless on the street. And that's fine. That's her choice. I get that. But you don't take these things personally. And, it's true in life as well. Like people who cut you off and on the highway or whatever, you don't know what's their story. Maybe they've got issues with having a bullying parent or something like that. You just don't take it personally. It's not about you. Don't try to change to please these people. Be who you are and just understand, God, we all have so many issues. We're all trying to work these things out. And we do better if we're willing to share what we know.
Is there anything you never get asked that you wish people would ask you?
Amy, people blow me away.
You everything.
No, they add kids especially. They will go there. I get asked so many neat and interesting questions. And I think the reason I get asked such good questions is because my story makes people think about their own stories. Mm-hmm. And I was at an event one time and some woman said, do you have guilt? Do you experience a lot of guilt for being able to pull yourself out of poverty? And people turned around and sort of gasped like, oh, she shouldn't have said that. That was a horrible thing to say. And I got to tell you something. I knew right away that woman had pulled herself out of poverty. Mm-hmm. And that's what she was asking about, so we talked afterwards and she's like, yeah. Like, how do you deal with, survivor's guilt, basically? So when you hear those off-color questions or the questions, there's always some reason behind it. And people, nobody's ever asked me a question that genuinely upset me. Because if people really want to know the answer, let's figure it out. And like I said, I might not know it, but we'll have fun trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and it's not so much a question as a thought that a lot of people who grow up in Appalachia, even those that don't experience traumatic childhoods or problematic childhoods, deal with that. It's a common theme, especially in Appalachian literature, of growing up ashamed, whether it's because of poverty or because of the stigma.
Yeah.
Poverty is not everywhere here.
No, it's not.
You can grow up middle class or wealthy here and still feel ashamed
of this otherness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we all have grappled with the guilt of leaving and deciding whether to come back.
Right. Yeah, the whole leaving, whether to come back, McDowell County, Welch, West Virginia, it was a one industry community. Mm-hmm. And so once the coal mining collapsed, it was just, it's tough. And it is not a betrayal to take care of yourself.
No.
It is, when the oxygen mask drops, you got to put it on yourself before you can. So it is not a betrayal. If you're able to come back, God bless you. Especially as an educator, I think that's magnificent. But so far as the shame or the stigma of being from Appalachia, I got no patience with that. That just, to me, that's just nonsense. It's
ignorance.
Yeah, it just, the whole otherness. To me, that's what makes the world so exciting, is meeting people who have a different experience than you do. And then you can share in the beautiful different accents, not just from different parts of the country, but from different parts of the world. I love the way different people talk, the different figures of speech. And it breaks my heart that I think it's disappearing a little bit. Mm-hmm. But, we learn from otherness. We learn from our mistakes as well. And I think that is something people should not only be upset when you're wrong about something. You should be kind of happy. Because that's when we learn. You go, oh, I was wrong about that. Let me rethink this. And so when they meet someone such as yourself, who's got yourself an Appalachia accent, they were like, oh my gosh, this woman is so smart. I was wrong about this. Mm-hmm. Let's change people's thinking. Let's open their eyes and open their hearts.
Does anything upset you or make you mad? You have the best outlook of anybody I've ever met.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some things that I said, I have a terrible sense of direction. But I think I'm my husband says I'm the happiest person he knows. Yeah, I've got a temper. Don't cross me, honey. Mm-hmm. You lie to me, you try to take it, I will take you down. I do not put up with that. Don't take me for a fool, because I put a very high emphasis on trust. Yeah. Trust and honesty and truth. And yeah, when people early on were saying they didn't believe the glass castle, that really pissed me off, because I expected a lot of reactions, mm-hmm. but to be challenged on that, mm-hmm. to have to gone through that. I mean, I was in an event one time, this woman said, I refuse to believe poverty existed like this in America in the 1970s. It's like, oh, come on, get out of your gated community from time to time. I have many bad qualities, but being a liar is not one of them. And the very first appearance that I did was on Diane Reed. And the first caller came in and said, fascinating story, I don't believe a word of it. And luckily, that show had interviewed mom and dad, so they at least knew that aspect. But people who refuse to believe, first of all, I think it's very important to have a BS detector, because I got a pretty good one. If you have a pathological liar for a dad, you can see other people's lies. Mm-hmm. But truth is very, very powerful. And to violate that truth with lies is a truly ugly, when there was that whole controversy about made-up memoirs, that really that infuriates me, because what you're telling people with somebody like James Fry with A Million Little Pieces, I went through addiction and this is how I got out. And he lied. So he was giving people false direction, false hope, right. Which is worse than nothing. So liars and backstabbers really upset me. Truth is the most powerful thing we have. And storytelling is so important. And storytelling can be manipulated. It can be you can choose your truths, and you can manipulate and scare people. So how honest we are, and the reason that we tell the story, is it for honesty, or is it to scare other people, to get power for yourself? What are you doing with this truth? I think people don't understand how important and powerful wars get started over storytelling, and wars get solved over it. So, and it can all be technically accurate, but what is the deeper truth? And it's just very important that all people are honest with themselves and with each other.
Beautifully said. As we started with the truth and we end with the truth.
The truth,
so thank you so much.
That's a good place to start, isn't it?
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
I hope you find your way back down to far southwest Virginia.
Well, the ways up here, they ain't the ways of the common man. I'll tell you no lie. Scratching out life in this rocky mountainside. Son, that ain't no way to die. On Diamond Creek, where the sun don't shine, and if you come out at all, you just might come out blind. Best not to wonder on that old man's steel. You might get out, but some never will. On Diamond Creek, where the sun don't shine, and if you come out at all, you just might come out blind. Best not to wonder on that old man's steel. You might get out, but some never will. You might get out, but some never will.
Have you subscribed to our Patreon page yet? In my latest post for my subscribers, I wrote about my interview with the late Yvette Perdue, a hero of the French Resistance. Captured by the Nazis and imprisoned at Dachau, she escaped to Austria and later found safety in Appalachia. Go subscribe and read about her incredible story of courage and survival, preserved before her passing in 2021. I visited Dachau about 20 years ago, and I describe what it was like to walk through that camp and then talk to Yvette about being there a few months later. I was always interested in helping others, she says. And when you do that, it makes you strong. Read my exclusive photo essay and interview with her now on Patreon. That post is also available for a one-time donation on Patreon, which will be given to Yvette's charity of choice, the Holly Help Spay and Neuter in Bristol.